The night my life ended didn't happen on the side of a highway. It ended with a phone call. One of those calls that shatters your world so completely that for a second, you forget how to breathe. It was 7:42 p.m., a number I didn't recognize. Detroit Medical Center, the voice said. And in those 3 words, my life split cleanly into before and after. My wife, Renata, was dead, 38 years old. A car crash on Maple Street, a road she'd driven 1,000 times before. The police said she swerved to miss a dog, hit a telephone pole at 50 miles an hour. The dog lived. She didn't. They told me she died instantly, but I've replayed it so many times in my head, wondering if they said that to make it easier for me to sleep at night. Because nothing about that night has ever felt instant. It lingers, like a wound that refuses to close. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks since the world turned to static. I sold everything after that. The house, gone. My truck, sold to my uncle for half of what it was worth. Even the Rolex my grandfather left me, the one he wore for 40 years at the Ford plant. Pawned. $43,000. That's what it costs to bury the love of your life in Detroit. $43,000 to say goodbye. The funeral director's name was Hutchkins. Soft hands, softer voice. He kept talking about payment plans like I was buying a used car, not burying my wife. But Renata deserved better than to be buried on credit. The day we put her in the ground was cold. Colder than October had any right to be. The sky hung low, heavy with gray, the kind that seems to press down on you, like the air itself wants to crush you into the dirt. I stood there in my only black suit, watching the hydraulic system lower her casket into the ground, and all I could think about were her last words to me. We'd argued that morning. Over paint colors. Ocean mist or harbor gray? She asked. I told her it didn't matter. She kissed my cheek anyway, smiled that small, forgiving smile of hers and said, "Maybe someone will use it soon." Then she left. That was it. That was the last thing she ever said to me about paint. Bianca, her sister, was there, standing apart from everyone else. Dark sunglasses, even though the sun never showed its face. Bianca had always been difficult. The kind of woman who made every room colder just by walking into it. She thought Renata married beneath her. While everyone else offered condolences and casseroles, Bianca just stood there, chain-smoking through her grief. When the minister started speaking about eternal rest, she finally moved, walked straight up to me, her heels sinking into the wet grass, and placed a cold hand on my arm. She leaned in, close enough for me to smell the smoke clinging to her black dress. What she whispered took 8 seconds to say, but it's been echoing in my head ever since. She was leaving you anyway. For her yoga instructor. I remember her voice, flat, almost bored. Like she wasn't just ripping a hole in my chest. Wyatt, my brother, asked what she'd said. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The minister's words faded. The air around me froze, leaving me anyway. The words looped endlessly in my skull, louder than the hum of the backhoe waiting to fill her grave. The yoga instructor's name was Nolan. 28 years old. Perfect posture. A man bun that looked like it had its own PR team. I'd met him once at a studio fundraiser. He'd called me Sir. That night, I went home to an empty house that already belonged to someone else, and I tore it apart. Every drawer, every closet, every secret place. I wasn't looking for closure, I was looking for proof. Proof that Bianca was lying, or that my wife had betrayed me. I didn't even know which one would hurt more. Emails, nothing. Texts, normal. Credit card statements, boring. Until I opened her jewelry box. Underneath the silver necklace I gave her on our 10th anniversary was something that didn't belong. A black USB drive. Cheap plastic. No bigger than my thumb. There was a strip of masking tape on it. In her handwriting. The same looping script she used for grocery lists, birthday cards, and love notes she used to leave in my lunchbox. It read, "If I die before 40. My hands shook as I carried it to the laptop. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the other room. I plugged it in. One file, a video, dated 3 weeks before her death. the same day she said she was working late. I clicked play. Renata's face filled the screen, but it wasn't the woman I remembered. Not the one who laughed when I spilled champagne on her at my cousin's wedding. Not the woman who danced barefoot in our kitchen after too many glasses of wine. This version of her looked haunted. Her eyes darted off camera every few seconds. Her breathing shallow. She looked like someone expecting a knock on the door she didn't want to answer. "Colton," she said. My name cracked in her throat. "If you're watching this, they killed me." I froze. "They killed me," she repeated, whispering now. "I found out something about your family. Something they've been hiding for 30 years. The proof is in your father's workshop." Then the video ended. Just like that. No explanation. No clues. Just my wife, dead 3 weeks later, telling me my family had something to do with it. I sat there for a long time, staring at the frozen frame of her face on the screen. My mind racing, my body numb. My father, Roland Torino, a retired electrician, a man who spoke little, worked hard, and built our lives with his hands. He wasn't perfect, but he was honest. At least, that's what I always believed. Now, I wasn't so sure. Our family had always seemed ordinary, boring even. Sunday dinners with my mother Lorraine, who made pot roast like it was a religious sacrament. My brother Wyatt with his twin boys, his perfect suburban life 2 streets over. Renata fit right into that rhythm. She and my mother would spend hours in the kitchen, laughing about recipes and life. My father and I would sit in the living room, watching the Lions lose another season. And now I was supposed to believe that somewhere in that same workshop, buried under the smell of motor oil and sawdust, was a secret worth killing for. Renata had always been curious. She sold houses for a living. She understood how people lived, what they hid behind fresh paint and locked doors. Maybe she saw something she wasn't supposed to. Maybe she connected dots that no one else could see. But who were they? And what did they have to do with my father? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the refrigerator hum, the pipes groan, the ghosts whisper. Every sound felt like a warning. At 2:37 a.m., I drove to my parents' house, parked across the street. Their lights were off. The workshop sat behind the garage, a small structure with a tin roof and a single floodlight that buzzed when it rained. I knew the lock code. Dad had taught it to me when I was 12. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered it. Organized chaos. Tools lined up in neat rows. The smell of oil and old wood. I started searching. Drawers, cabinets, shelves. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Then, under a tarp near the back wall, I found an old metal toolbox. The kind mechanics used in the 70s. The lid creaked when I opened it. Inside, papers. Dozens of them. Yellowed, brittle, covered in dust, and photographs. Black and white. Taken in the 90s. My father. Younger. Standing next to 2 men I didn't recognize. One of them in a police uniform. The other wearing a suit. Between them, what looked like a storage crate marked, "Property of the U.S. Department of Energy." And scrawled across the back of one photo, in my father's handwriting, 1989. Keep quiet. They're watching. My pulse started pounding in my ears. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew one thing. My wife had found out, and now she was dead. By morning, I was shaking. Not from fear, at least not just fear, but from realization. Renata had died in a crash that shouldn't have happened. A road she knew, a car she maintained religiously, and a dog that somehow walked away without a scratch. Maybe the accident wasn't an accident at all. The police said she swerved. But what if she was chased? What if someone wanted to silence her? I went back to the video, watched it again and again. Every flinch, every breath, every glance off camera. I slowed it down, frame by frame, until something caught my eye. In the reflection of her kitchen window, barely visible, a shadow moved. A man, tall, standing just out of view. And that's when I knew. She wasn't alone when she recorded it. My wife had been watched. And now, Someone was watching me. Because when I turned off the laptop and looked out my own window that night, a car was parked across the street. No lights. Engine idling, I could just make out the glow of a cigarette inside, and that's when the headlights came on. Blinding, sudden, and the car pulled away. I ran outside barefoot, heart hammering, but it was gone, just like her. Somewhere out there someone knew what Renata had discovered, someone who wanted me to stop looking. But I couldn't. Not anymore, because the truth wasn't buried with her. It was waiting, in that workshop, in that video, in the lies my family had been living for 3 decades. And as I stood in the cold Detroit night, watching the taillights vanish down the street, I realized something I hadn't before. Maybe Bianca was right. Maybe Renata was planning to leave me. But now, I was the one who couldn't let go. Because every secret she'd died for, every word she'd whispered into that camera, it was all leading somewhere, and I was going to find it. Even if it killed me too. To be continued. They say every tragedy begins like any other ordinary morning. But the day my wife died, the day everything I thought I knew about my life fell apart, began with paint samples. Ocean, mist or harbor gray, that was our biggest problem that morning. She held the cards up to the light coming. Through the kitchen window, frowning thoughtfully, her hair still damp from the shower. "They're completely different," she said, teasing me. "Look at the undertones." I barely looked up from my coffee. Nobody ever uses that room anyway. She rolled her eyes, walked over, and kissed my cheek. A small, familiar gesture that should have meant nothing. But I would replay it in my mind 1,000 times in the weeks that followed. "Maybe someone will soon," she said softly. Then she grabbed her purse, her keys, and that oversized leather binder she always carried for her real estate listings. "Early showing on the east side," she called out. "Young couple looking for their first home." The door closed behind her at exactly 8:17 a.m. The police knocked on that same door at 11:43. They said she swerved to avoid a dog. Hit a telephone pole doing 50 miles an hour on Maple Street, a road she'd driven 1,000 times before. The dog lived. She didn't. They told me it was instant. I don't believe them. The funeral nearly destroyed me. Emotionally, financially, completely. No one ever tells you how expensive it is to die properly. Mr. Hutchkins, the funeral director, had a voice like warm milk and hands that had never seen a day of hard work. His office smelled of furniture polish and quiet greed. He sat across from me, sliding glossy brochures across the desk as if he were selling vacation packages instead of coffins. "The basic package," he said, "starts at $28,000. By the time he finished adding essentials, the cemetery plot, headstone, service fees, the number climbed to $43,000. He smiled, as if the number was perfectly reasonable. "We offer payment plans," he murmured, his voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy. But Renata deserved better than installments. She deserved to be buried without debt collectors hovering over her grave. That's when I found the letter, hidden in her desk drawer. Policy terminated. She'd let our life insurance lapse 6 months earlier, without telling me. I called the company, desperate, begging for some loophole, some grace period. But they said she'd stopped paying premiums. Something about restructuring finances. She'd never mentioned it. Not once. I emptied our savings account first. $12,000 we'd been saving for the Italy trip we always talked about but never took. Then I sold the house. A flipper named Gary showed up with cash and a calculator. He offered $60,000 below asking and wanted me out within a week. I didn't argue. My truck went next. A Ford F-150 I'd bought brand new 5 years earlier. Sold it to my Uncle Gus for $8,000. Half its worth. He called it a favor. And finally, the watch. My grandfather's Rolex. Submariner. Scratched. Worn. Perfect. He'd worn it every day at the Ford plant from 1958 until he retired in 1998. It still ticked with quiet precision, as if mocking the chaos of everything else. The pawnshop owner. A man named Duke handed me $4,000 in cash. "I hold for 6 months," he said kindly. "You come back." We both knew I wouldn't. The funeral itself was a blur. "Black clothes," whispered condolences. That faint scent of lilies and decay that never quite leaves your clothes afterward. My Aunt Marlene kept touching my shoulder, telling me Renata was in a better place, as if dying at 38 was some kind of upgrade. My coworker, Dennis, shook my hand too hard and mumbled something about time healing all wounds. My mother, Lorraine, stood beside me like a sentinel, quietly deflecting the waves of well-meaning people when their sympathy became too much. And Bianca. Bianca stood apart, leaning against the back wall like she was holding it up, dark sunglasses hiding her eyes though we were indoors. She didn't move during the viewing, didn't say a word, just smoked outside her car during the procession, the window cracked enough for the ash to fall onto the wind. At Mount Olivet Cemetery, the October wind sliced through my suit like paper. The priest spoke from Ecclesiastes about there being a time for everything. But all I could think was, her time shouldn't have been now. Then came the sound, that mechanical whirring as the hydraulic lift began to lower her casket. Cold, industrial, too final. That's when Bianca finally approached. She still held her white rose, the only bit of brightness against her black dress. She stopped beside me, close enough that I could smell the sharp mix of cigarette smoke and expensive perfume. Her hand touched my arm, fingers, ice cold even through the fabric of my jacket. "She was leaving you anyway," she whispered. "For her yoga instructor, Nolan. Thought you should know." 8 words. That's all it took. 8 words that detonated everything left inside me. Before I could even respond, she dropped the rose onto the casket and walked away, her heels clicking like gunshots against the pavement. Wyatt, my brother, asked what she said. Patricia, his wife, watched me carefully. Even my father, normally quiet and unreadable, looked at me with concern. "Nothing," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. She said nothing. But that night the silence was unbearable. I sat in what used to be our living room. Boxes everywhere. Echoes bouncing off walls that already belonged to someone else. And I let her words consume me. "She was leaving you anyway." I threw our wedding album against the wall. Photos spilled across the floor. Frozen memories of a life that might have been a lie. And then I started searching. Every drawer, every folder, every trace of her. I went through her phone, nothing but work messages and mundane texts. Her last one to me was a heart emoji after I'd said I'd pick up milk. Her emails were the same. Receipts, listings, no Nolan, no affair. I wanted proof of betrayal, of innocence. I didn't even know which I wanted more. Then I found it, in her jewelry box, a USB drive, small, black, a strip of masking tape wrapped around it. In her careful handwriting, 5 words. "If I die before 40. I just stared, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo in the quiet. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered once, twice. One file appeared, a video. Dated October 2nd. 3 weeks before she died. The day she came home, 2 hours late. I clicked play. Her face filled the screen, pale, scared, eyes red from crying. She was sitting on the edge of the bed in the guest room, the same one she'd wanted to repaint. Beige walls behind her, uninviting and dull. "Colton," she began, and her voice cracked. "If you're watching this, it means they killed me." I froze. "And before you think I'm being dramatic or paranoid," she said, "please, just listen." She held up a manila folder thick with papers. 3 weeks ago, I was showing a house on Crestwood Drive. The buyer never showed. But in the basement, I found a box the previous owner must have forgotten. It was full of FBI documents, surveillance photos, trial transcripts. Your father's name was all over them. My throat went dry. She took a shaky breath and kept going. "Colton, Your father, Roland Torino, isn't who you think he is." She reached into the folder and pulled out a photograph. Old, grainy. My father, younger, standing beside men in FBI jackets. "Your Uncle Gus isn't your father's brother," she said. "His real name is Jeppe Torino. He testified against the Torino crime family in 1994 as part of a federal witness protection deal." Her voice trembled now, but her eyes burned with determination. "Your father, Roland, wasn't an electrician. He was a U.S. Marshal assigned to protect him." I felt my stomach twist. She held another photo closer to the camera. My father, smiling, a badge clipped to his belt. "Your whole family," she whispered, "is in witness protection. You, Wyatt, your mother, Lorraine, all of you. None of you are who you think you are." The room seemed to tilt around me, but she wasn't done. Her voice broke again. "And here's the worst part. The reason we could never have children." I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't me, and it wasn't bad luck. She swallowed hard. "When you were 3 years old, your father authorized an experimental procedure. You were sterilized, Colton. There's a sealed court document about it. The Torino bloodline was deemed too dangerous to continue. The federal prosecutor insisted on it as part of the immunity deal." Tears streamed down her face. "Your birth name was Carlo Torino, Jr. Your biological father, the man you've never known, was the head of the crime family. He ordered the murders of 3 judges before he was convicted. Your mother, your birth mother, made a deal with the feds to save you and Wyatt, but the price was ensuring the bloodline ended with you." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice breaking again. "I confronted Roland last month," she whispered. "I thought he'd deny it, but he didn't. He told me I was putting everyone in danger by digging into this. He said the Torinos never forget, never forgive, and if they find out where you all are, they'll kill every last one of you." Her tone changed then. Quiet but fierce. "He told me to burn the documents, to forget everything. But I couldn't. You deserve to know who you are, Colton." The video ended. Just like that, silence. I sat there in the dark, staring at her frozen face on the screen. My pulse roaring in my ears, everything I thought I knew about my life. My parents, my brother, even my own body, had just been ripped apart in a single, trembling confession. The woman I buried 3 weeks ago had died carrying the truth my family had been running from for 30 years. And if she was right, if they killed her to keep it buried, then I wasn't just a widower anymore. I was the last living descendant of a crime. Family the government thought it erased, and someone out there, someone watching, already knew that I knew. Because, as I sat there in that half-empty house replaying her words again and again, a car engine idled outside my window. Low, steady, waiting, and for the first time in my life, I understood exactly why she'd looked so afraid in that video. To be continued. It all started with 5 words written on a strip of masking tape. "If I die before 40. That's what her handwriting said. Careful, slanted, familiar. My wife's handwriting. Renata. The woman I buried 2 weeks ago. The woman I thought I knew better than myself. But that night, in the silence of a house that didn't feel like home anymore, I learned that I never really knew her at all. When I hit play on that USB drive, everything I believed about love, family, even my own name, shattered. Her face appeared on the screen, pale and frightened. "Colton," she said, her voice trembling. "If you're watching this, it means they killed me." I thought she was paranoid. I thought grief had broken her mind in those last weeks. But no, she wasn't paranoid. She was right, because in that single video she exposed a secret buried so deep that it rewrote the story of my entire life. She told me I wasn't who I thought I was, that my family, my parents, my brother weren't who they said they were, and what she revealed made me realize that the woman I loved was never killed in an accident. She was executed. She said there was proof in my father's workshop, a metal box labeled circuit breakers. That's where the truth waited, and as I sat in the kitchen, My laptop screen fading to black. Her last words echoed in my head. "Your father isn't who you think he is." I called my brother Wyatt. My voice was shaking. "Meet me at Dad's workshop. Right now. Don't tell anyone where you're going." The workshop stood behind my father's house, the same place he'd spent 40 years fixing radios and televisions, telling neighbors he'd retired from electrical work. I used to think that space smelled like childhood. Sawdust, oil, metal, safety. That night, it smelled like a tomb. I flicked on the lights. They buzzed overhead, humming like a nervous pulse. Every tool hung neatly in place. Every shelf labeled in Dad's blocky handwriting. But none of it looked innocent anymore. Wyatt showed up 5 minutes later, his car headlights slicing through the fog. "Colton, what the hell's going on?" "It's 11 at night. Help me find it," I said. "A box labeled circuit breakers." He blinked. "You're scaring me. Is this about Renata? You need to talk to someone about your grief." I shoved the USB drive into his hand. "Just watch this." He hesitated, then pulled out his phone and hit play. I didn't need to watch his face to know when the part about our father came up. His jaw slackened, his breathing grew shallow. By the end, he looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. "This can't be real," he whispered. "It's real," I said, tearing through boxes. "Help me find the proof, fuses, wire nuts. Old schematics. Nothing, until my eyes fell on the old Craftsman tool chest in the corner, the one Dad said was his father's. The bottom drawer had always been locked. "Nothing important in there," he'd told us. Lies. I jammed a crowbar into the lock and pried it open. The metal shrieked as it gave way, and for a split second, I swear the air changed, like something dark and hidden had just been released. Under a stack of yellowed manuals sat the box. Metal, dented, heavy. Circuit breakers. Written in fading marker on masking tape. Inside were the ghosts of our past, a photograph of my father, Roland Davies, standing beside FBI agents, a badge clipped to his belt. Not an electrician, a U.S. Marshal. Another photo, me and Wyatt as kids. But our school ID cards didn't say Colton and Wyatt Davies. They said Carlo Jr. and Vincent Torino. And the woman holding us wasn't my mother. Her name was written on the back in ink that had faded to brown. Maria Torino. 1993. Then the papers. Stacks of them. Government seals. E-witness protection documents dated November 15, 1994. Yeppe Torino, alias Uncle Gus, testifying against the Torino crime family in exchange for immunity, and new identities for his entire extended family. Our family. And then came the document that made my stomach drop. A medical report from Cincinnati Children's Hospital. My name at the top, age 3, procedure, bilateral vasectomy. Authorized by U.S. Marshal Roland Davies. I couldn't breathe. Wyatt found his own file. Same procedure, same age. We looked at each other in horror. Our futures had been stolen before we could even form memories. Wyatt's voice broke the silence. "We need to confront him. Right now." Dad was in his recliner when we stormed in, watching the 11 o'clock news like nothing had changed. Mom, or Lorraine, whatever her name really was, sat knitting quietly beside him. When they looked up, I saw it. The flicker of recognition. The silent understanding that the truth was out. "You found the box," Dad said. "Not even a question. You let them kill her," I shouted, throwing the photos at his feet. "Renata figured out your lies and you let them murder her." Mom started crying, but Dad stayed calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes from decades of making impossible decisions. "Sit down, son," he said softly. "Don't call me son." My voice cracked. "My name is Carlo." He stood up slowly. "No, Carlo Torino Jr. died in 1994. You're Colton Davies, my son in every way that matters." Wyatt stepped forward, fists trembling. "Except biologically, except you stole our ability to have children." For the first time, I saw the years catch up to him. His shoulders sagged. His eyes filled with something like regret. "Your biological father was a monster," he said quietly. "He ordered the execution of judges. He burned a family alive, children younger than you were. The prosecutors decided that bloodline had to end. It was the only way to ensure the violence didn't continue." "So you played God," I said. "I played father," he replied. "I raised you. I loved you. I kept you safe." His composure cracked then. "Renata, she wouldn't stop digging. I begged her. She met with that lawyer. Nolan's brother, right?" Someone noticed. The Torinos still have people watching even after all these years. When word reached them that she'd found out about the deal, I got a call. They said if we didn't handle it internally, they'd handle it their way. I felt sick. "You chose them over her." He shook his head slowly. "I chose you over her. If she exposed us, you'd all be dead within a week. The crash was clean, professional. She didn't suffer." "You knew," I said, my voice breaking. "You knew they were going to kill her." "I knew someone would die," he whispered. "I just didn't know who." He sank back into his chair, his face hollow. "You think I sleep easy? Every phone call, every knock at the door, I thought it was them. But you boys, you had lives, careers, love, and that's more than you would have had otherwise." "Love built on lies," I said. "Love is love," Mom whispered. Her voice shook. "We weren't your real parents, but we loved you like our own." That part was never a lie. For a moment I almost believed her. But then I looked at the man who'd raised me, the man who'd walked me down the aisle, who taught me how to ride a bike, who taught me to be good. And I saw what he really was. A savior and a destroyer. A man who had saved my life by destroying my future. "I'm going to the FBI," I said. He nodded, almost relieved. "I know, there's a bag in the workshop. Cash, clean documents. You'll need to disappear after you talk to them." "I don't care," I said. "Yes, you do," he replied. "Because you're my son, and I taught you how to survive." I drove straight to the FBI field office in downtown Detroit. The city was asleep, but my mind wasn't. The guard at the front desk stared at me, wild-eyed, clutching a metal box like it was a bomb. "I need to talk to someone," I said. "It's about witness protection. And murder." They took me upstairs, through metal detectors and locked doors, into a gray room that smelled like stale coffee and old secrets. Agent Sarah Petrosky walked in. Calm, sharp, focused. The kind of person who didn't waste words. I told her everything. Every detail. Every lie. Every name. She listened for 12 hours straight. Made phone calls. Brought in officials. The Marshal's Service, DOJ, even someone from the Attorney General's office. The USB drive became evidence. The documents from the workshop were photographed and sealed, and then came the call that confirmed everything. Renata's accident wasn't an accident. Brake fluid on the road. Skid marks that didn't match. A black SUV tailing her car minutes before the crash. Professional. Quick, just like Roland said. 3 days later, my parents vanished. No goodbye, no note. Coffee still warm on the table. TV still playing. They'd reactivated whatever protocol existed for people like them. The ghosts who protected ghosts. Wyatt left soon after. Said he couldn't handle living under a name that wasn't his. Said maybe Dad was right, that surviving meant becoming someone else again. We met one last time in a parking garage. He hugged me, handed me a burner phone with one number programmed in. "Call if you ever need me," he said. Then he was gone. And I was left standing in the cold, holding a phone, a name that wasn't mine, and a box full of evidence that had torn my entire life apart. But lately, strange things have been happening. Calls from unknown numbers. Cars parked outside my apartment that drive off when I step outside. Someone left a white rose on my doorstep yesterday, Renata's flower, and I can't stop wondering, what if she wasn't the last secret they buried? What if the truth I uncovered was only the beginning? You ever look in the mirror and realize the face staring back at you isn't yours? Not really. Not the person you thought you were, not the man your family told you to be. That was me, standing in a cracked bathroom mirror in Detroit, fluorescent light buzzing overhead, eyes hollow, hands shaking, because for the first time in my life, I knew the truth. The FBI had offered me protection, a new identity, a new start, but I was done running, done hiding behind other people's lies, done pretending that someone else's past didn't already own me, so I said no. I didn't want their safe houses, their new names, their blank slates. I wanted my own truth. I went down to the courthouse, signed the papers myself, and made it official. No aliases. No witness protection. Just me. Colton Davies. The name I'd carried quietly in my heart for years, waiting for the moment I could finally claim it without fear. Let the Torinos come. Let them find me if they wanted. Because by that point, there wasn't much left to lose. It was October when Bianca found me. Cold air, fallen leaves sticking to wet ground, the sky a dull gray that matched the ache in my chest. I was sitting at Renata's grave, the woman who'd loved me more fiercely than anyone ever had, and died because of it. The ground had finally settled since the funeral, and the temporary marker was gone. In its place stood polished black granite, simple and solid. Beloved wife, seeker of truth. That's all it said, no flowery words, no dates or scriptures or sentimental quotes. Just honesty. That's what she would have wanted. Bianca walked up quietly, carrying fresh flowers. She looked older than I remembered. Grief has a way of doing that. She knelt beside me, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry," she said, "about what I said at the funeral. I was angry. I thought she was hiding something. I thought she was cheating." Her words hung there between us, carried by the wind that rustled through the cemetery trees. I didn't blame her. "I know," I told her. She wasn't distant because of another man. She was distant because she was trying to protect everyone. Even you. The FBI had told me there was a letter, something Renata had written in her office before everything fell apart. They said she'd known something might happen, that she'd prepared for it. Bianca nodded, brushing a tear from her cheek. "She loved you, Colton," she said. "More than you'll ever know. That last video she made, she spent half of it talking about you, about how you deserved the truth, how you deserved to make your own choices." We sat there for a long time. No words, just the sound of the wind, the distant hum of traffic, and two people bound by loss and truth. Finally, Bianca stood to leave. But before she turned away, she said something that stayed with me ever since. "You remember Nolan? The yoga instructor?" I nodded. "His brother really was a federal attorney," she said. "Renata was trying to get you both into legitimate witness protection. Not fake names, real new identities, ones you could choose. She had plane tickets booked for November. She was going to surprise you with a fresh start. A fresh start. She'd been planning to save me, even as she knew her own time was running out. Now, years later, my life is quiet. I teach chemistry at a high school in Portland, Oregon, about as far from Detroit as I could get without leaving the country. My students call me Mr. D. They think it's funny that I'm strict about lab safety but lenient about late homework. They think I'm just another teacher who grades fairly, keeps his promises, and always has coffee in his hand by 7:30 a.m. What they don't know is that Mr. D was born Carlo Torino Jr., the son of a mob boss. A boy raised by lies and shadows. A man who watched his world burn because of one woman's courage. They don't know that every time I look at the photo on my desk, Renata smiling in the sunlight. I'm staring at the reason I'm still alive. My apartment is small. One bedroom, but it's enough. The walls are painted ocean mist, the color Renata picked out for our guest room. I painted it myself one night, brush trembling in my hand, tears falling faster than the paint could dry. From the window, I can see Mount Hood. snow-capped and distant. Some mornings the light hits it just right, and for a second everything feels clean again, like maybe, somehow, the past can't reach me here. But then there are the nights, the quiet ones, the ones that hit hardest. Sometimes I wake up around 3 a.m. I swear I hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, stopping just outside my door. I hold my breath. Wait. Listen, but nothing happens. It's just the creak of the old building, the sound of my mind still haunted by a name I tried to bury. Torino. It's strange how even when you escape the danger, the fear stays. It changes shape, hides in the shadows of your new life. You learn to live with it, to make peace with the idea that one day it might all catch up to you. So I get up, make coffee, watch the sunrise. Then I go teach my kids about atoms and molecules, about how things can be broken apart and remade into something entirely different. I tell them, even the smallest element can change under the right conditions. They think I'm talking about chemistry, but really, I'm talking about myself, because the truth, as painful as it was, transformed me. Destroyed everything I thought I knew, but gave me something I never had before. Freedom. Renata died for that truth, and while I'd give anything to have her back, I finally understand what she meant when she said some lies are too heavy to carry forever. It's strange how love can save you and destroy you in the same breath, how someone can break your heart just to give you a chance to live honestly. Some nights, I sit in the dark and replay that USB video, the one the FBI recovered from her office. Her voice cracks halfway through. She's tired, scared, but still fighting. She tells me to remember who I am. That truth might cost everything, but it's still worth it. I close my eyes, let her voice fill the silence, and for a few minutes, it's like she's still here. That video, that final act of love, is all the proof I need. The proof that even when the world falls apart, there are people who will risk everything to make sure you see it clearly. The FBI once told me that my father's crimes reached deeper than anyone knew, that his empire was built on fear, corruption, and death. They said I'd never be safe, that the Torino name would always carry blood on its hands. Maybe they're right, but I also know this. I'm not my father. I never was, and I never will be. Now I live in the light of my own choices, even if that light sometimes feels like a target. There's a kind of peace in that, knowing that everything I am, every scar and secret and sleepless night, was earned, that I'm no longer a lie someone else created, that every morning I wake up as Colton Davies, not the son of a mob boss, not a fugitive, not a man in hiding, but a survivor of truth. People say truth hurts. They're wrong. Lies. Lies are what kill you slowly. Truth doesn't hurt. Truth cuts, but it also heals. And once it's in you, it changes everything. Sometimes after class, when the halls are quiet and the sun hits the glass speakers just right, I think about how fragile everything is, how one revelation can flip your world upside down, and how maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe the point isn't to erase your past, but to finally face it, and decide what kind of person you'll be after the smoke clears. Because you can run all you want. Change your name. Move across the country. Paint your walls ocean mist. But until you face the truth, you're still trapped in someone else's story, and I refuse to be that man anymore. My name is Colton Davies. I teach high school chemistry, and once upon a time, I was the son of one of Detroit's most feared men. Now, I'm just trying to live a life honest enough to make her proud. Still, some nights, I catch myself glancing toward the door, wondering if tonight's the night. The past finally knocks, if the footsteps I hear won't fade this time, and if they do, I'll be ready. because the truth might destroy everything, but it also sets you free. And maybe, just maybe, freedom is the one thing the Torinos never learned how to take. But then again, sometimes I still wonder who's really watching who.